hope you're keeping well. You're very welcome back to LinkShadow Talk, the podcast series where we sit down with our top-tier Security Alliance vendors, customers and partners to talk all things cybersecurity. Today, we're very fortunate to have in our Dubai office, Saurabh Verma. And Saurabh Verma is the Vice President and the Regional Head for ICT Advisory for Frost & Sullivan. Saurabh, you're very welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
No problem at all. So I mentioned in the intro there that we're here in our Dubai office and you've had a chance to walk through the office to meet a number of the team. And of course, we make absolute full use of our natural views here. So what's your first impressions?
Well, it's amazing. I think the office is quite lively. Despite the fact it's a Friday afternoon, it's still quite a lively environment in the office. And yeah, definitely the views that you guys have here is something that I really envy of. But yeah, hopefully someday we'll shift to this office maybe one day.
Maybe we'll put a little office down the bottom for you, absolutely. Saurabh, just before I suppose we kick off and we start speaking about Frost & Sullivan and the radar for Network Detection Response 2024, if you would be so kind just to kind of give me a little bit of an introduction into yourself, your background, your own role within Frost & Sullivan, and what I suppose you do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for asking me that question. Not a lot of people do that, but all right. So once again, thank you for having me. So I manage the ICT advisory practice for Frost & Sullivan. So anything that falls under the advisory, anything which is custom work that we do for a lot of our clients within the ICT space. Could be things around information, technology, telecom operators, IT services, software, applications, pretty much everything within the wider ICT gamut. So that's what I primarily focus on. Frost & Sullivan, we have been in the region for almost 15, 20 years now. Almost 70 people strong in the region, equally split between our Dubai and Riyadh office. My typical day, I would say, talking to people like yourself, meeting a lot of clients, doing a lot of strategy execution and implementation work as well. I do work very closely with our sales teams as well on a day-to-day basis. Just like everyone else, I also spend a lot of time in Riyadh as well. So yeah, that's a brief intro, I would say.
Very good. And I know you know some of our colleagues in our Riyadh office as well in Saudi. So they were actually sending their best regards as well just before we came in to start recording. So in the intro, I briefly mentioned the Frost Radar report for Network Detection Response 2024. Indeed, LinkShadow, we're very, very blessed in the fact that we have been recognised as one of the leaders in the Frost Radar for 2024. But just, I suppose, for our viewer, would you mind giving a brief introduction as to what exactly the Frost Radar is, how it is compiled and the research that goes in, behind that particular study?
Absolutely. I think that will set a very good context to what we're about to likely to discuss in the next couple of minutes or so. So see, in summary, I would say Frost & Sullivan is largely it's a competitive benchmarking tool. Okay, what you have on radar is basically a growth index as well as an innovation index.
Correct.
And within each of these parameters, you do have I would say 5 broader buckets, or attributes within the growth, and the same applies to innovation as well. Within the growth side, you typically look at things like, how, let's say, if you want to do a competitive assessment or a benchmarking of yourself versus some of your peers, you would essentially look at things like how well you have grown in the last couple of years, right? What is the kind of market share you have captured from your peers or competitors in the industry, right? And similarly on the innovation side, which we believe is a far more important metric, I would say. You essentially focus on things like what is the kind of R&D investments you are making, from a product development perspective. How are you enabling your channel partners? What is the kind of investments you are making in the marketing front as well? And then, most of it is primarily about innovation, because if you look at the underlying theme of Frost Radar, what it says is that the idea is to basically benchmark or do a competitive benchmarking based on the innovation that companies have done, and through that innovation, the growth that they have achieved. So while we have growth and innovation both, but growth is actually driven by the innovation, which is why I personally believe that innovation is a far more important metric as compared to growth. Growth not necessarily always may result in innovation, but if you innovate, if you keep improvising yourself, it's quite likely that you would achieve growth as well.
Okay.
So that's a brief summary of Frost Radar.
So Saurabh, thank you very much for that insight, and you really focus there on the fact that the Frost Radar doesn't particularly, I suppose, hone in on just growth, but also on the index. And for us, we're obviously very, very proud that we are very well positioned when it comes to that innovation index. But naturally, there are certain criteria, there's different things from a research point of view that you and your research team look into when it comes to positioning a particular vendor or a particular NDR provider in this particular scenario on that index. So whether it be the customization or the interface or whatever the case may be, would you mind just developing a little bit further on that side and exactly what are the reasons for positioning LinkShadow, for example, on that axis?
Absolutely. So see, if you break down the innovation metric as such, I would say there are 2 or 3 broader buckets. Okay, yes, we do have 5 very specific attributes, but they again get further dissected and distributed and broken down into multiple attributes. But if I really break down the overall innovation piece itself, I think there are 2 or 3 broader buckets. One is definitely your R&D spend. Okay, the core product innovation itself. How are you supporting your clients from managing their cybersecurity posture in a much better way through your product innovation. And then at the same time, it is not just about the product innovation piece itself, it is also about the go-to-market piece as well. Even from the innovation also has to be in the way you sell, the way you approach your clients, the way you enable your channel partners as well.
Yes.
So all of those, I would say the pre-product cycle as well as the post-product cycle, all of that gets factored into the innovation piece, right? Like I said, although there are just 5 broader parameters, but if you actually, start double-clicking on each of them, there are actually a lot more factors that typically go in. Now, to answer your second question in terms of why LinkShadow sort of stood out or I would say emerged as a very strong contender and a leader as well on the innovation index, because definitely you guys are sort of checking all those boxes. You are doing everything right. And the way typically Frosted are, I did not talk about this earlier, but if you look at our methodology, okay, so definitely, like I said, it's a competitive benchmarking tool. The way it is done is that the way we would have, during our research process, we would have very stringent, I would say very in-depth analysis on you guys. Mm-hmm. I do know personally, because I have myself worked on this as well along with my team, that we did have a series of conversation with your team, right from your folks in Saudi as well as from your global teams as well. Mm-hmm. And these are the guys from sales, technical, marketing, so on and so forth. Yeah. And we have done similar conversation with all of your peers as well. I mean, whoever basically chose to participate in this study. Mm-hmm. And that is how, so, it's a very, very in-depth and very, very technical conversation as well. It's not just about, looking at the numbers, how well you have done, so on and so forth. But innovation, I'm going to repeat myself again, but like I said, I personally believe that innovation is it's a little bit more important metric as compared to growth asset, because innovation can drive growth as well. Yeah. So yeah, I think in my opinion, when we were doing the assessment, you guys really stood out from an innovation perspective, the kind of product innovation you guys are doing, and more specifically on the NDR piece itself. I think congratulations to the LinkShadow team, I would say.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the global team, you mentioned the team that are based in Saudi. We obviously have a very large, I suppose, presence here in this particular GCC market. Yeah. But as we were walking in, you walked in past the R&D team, and you see a 30-strong team there who are always looking at trends. They're always looking at, what could be the next objective for us to work on, and driven very, very passionately about the product, very, very passionately about the service that we're able to provide. But it does mention also in the report that cybersecurity and NDR in particular is kind of leaning towards a very proactive approach. We no longer sit back and wait for, particular trends in the market and then we react to it. We want to be proactive. So that's not only with innovation, but it's also with NDR adoption. Yeah. So would you mind just for a couple of moments kind of developing a little bit on that point, why exactly or what is actually leading the adoption towards a proactive NDR approach?
Absolutely. Before I do that, I just want to comment on one more point. I think when I walked into your office and you were giving me a tour, mm-hmm. one thing that really stood out is the size of your R&D team. Mm-hmm. Okay, typically for most of the organizations, you would see that the region, the GCC region, it's in general, for most of the global organizations, it's a very sales-oriented region. but the fact that you do have a sizable, you mentioned 30 odd people,
Correct.
It's quite a sizable presence for our R&D team to be sitting in a high cost location. So it really shows the kind of commitment that you have.
Correct.
The investments that you are making towards R&D and which is quite phenomenal. Now coming back to your second question, which is about from reactive to proactive piece. I mean, I'm just going to go back a little bit in history of the overall, I would say, ICT industry itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back, let's say 15, 20 years back, I mean, those are the days then managed services as a concept was picking up. There's a lot of buzz around it. And one of the main fundamental reasons why managed services is still a growing market, primarily because it supports customers from moving from a reactive environment to a proactive environment. That is what all it is about, right? The same concept applies to security as well. The moment you start supporting organizations from a reactive environment to a proactive environment, it fundamentally changes the game.
Yeah.
Okay, you look at any technology or any solution or any fast growing services as such. Even if you look at something like NDR, for example, I think we had done some initial estimates on the market size itself. It's close to a $3 billion market right now, right? And going at almost a 17 to 20% CAGR, I would say, the growth rate that we are talking about. 20% growth rate is phenomenal. You don't see that kind of numbers anymore for most of the markets, most of the product markets specifically, right? Services is a very different game. So yeah, I think that's what I would say. I mean, anything that really supports clients in managing their security posture, making them more aware, making them more, I would say, proactive about it. It definitely helps in every possible way to the clients. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned there about, helping to the clients. Like, would your experience be that when, for example, a particular NDR vendor is, seen in high regard, so to speak, especially on the Frost radar, that it kind of cements our position or the other vendor's position if they're given, good recognition, that it cements their position to the potential customer as these guys are leaders. They have, as you mentioned again, heavily invested in R&D, and we pride ourselves on that investment because we don't want to be seen as just another vendor who maybe tries to push sales and tries to leave the bucket dry, so to speak. We want to show that we're committed to this area and committed to our customers, not just in the short term but in the long term. We'll be selling customers' products there. We will have them, as our loyal customers for years and years to come. So we're very happy to show that loyalty to the area. But again, back to my point, do you feel that the Frost & Sullivan report, that radar does help cement our position or other vendors' positions, towards the customer as being a leader?
I think that's a great question. I think it definitely does. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that if you look at Frost & Sullivan, I think there are very few analysts and advisory firms who are actually as old as we are.
Yeah.
We are a almost 70-year-old organization. We have been in this business for a very, very long time. Even Frost Radar as a concept it has been there from, I think, last 15, 17 years now. Mm. So it's a quite successful tool, I would say, and it definitely carries a lot of credibility as well. So that's the first part as in terms of Frost & Sullivan brand name itself. The second part is the fact that it's a very neutral report that we typically do in Frost for a Frost Radar, right? We do not have any vested interest to promote or to push a specific vendor and showcase that particular vendor in a better way or in a beautiful way as such. So there is no interest. And all the clients that actually subscribe to our reports, our content, they understand that. They do value this particular piece, that Frost & Sullivan is a very, very vendor neutral organization. I mean, yes, we do work with LinkShadow, but similarly we work with some of, I would say, a lot of the peers, your peers that are actually there in the Frost Radar as well. So we have to be neutral, right? And this is something which is very well accepted and highly appreciated by the clients. And secondly, the way Frost & Sullivan is structured, yes, we do a lot of, the way I represent the ICT practice, we've got 11 other verticals as well. So while this particular Frost Radar report could be very relevant for a IT organization within a wider organization, but at the same time, it is also read and accessed by a lot of business guys, a lot of strategy guys as well at the same time. Yeah. Across 12 different verticals. This could be automotive, this could be aerospace and defense, chemicals, manufacturing, logistics, so on and so forth. So yeah, it it's definitely a much wider reach. And to answer your question specifically, yes, it does bring in a lot of credibility. And from a client's perspective, from a reader perspective, for them, this report is a Frost & Sullivan report. It's not a LinkShadow report. So LinkShadow is not going out and saying that, hey guys, we are the best. Frost & Sullivan is saying this, right? Mm-hmm. So definitely it matters a lot in that way, I would say.
Yeah, well, I think that you mentioned the word credibility. And I think when someone downloads the report, when they read through it, sometimes it's very, very clear and obvious that, for example, LinkShadow, we have had our foot in the door and we're trying to make things, sound in the best way possible for us.
Yeah.
But I think you truly are able to go through the report. You're able to see this is an impartial report. It gives the pros and the cons of LinkShadow, but of all the other vendors in the market, etc. So I think for a potential client who is evaluating a number of different solutions, as you said, credibility, to know that you're reading a report that is impartial and that the findings are true and accurate, it can't help but being the most valuable thing possible to your CISO or to your IT manager or whoever it is who, at the end of the day, has to put their hands in their pockets and allocate budgets for network detection and response, maybe for the years and years ahead. As you said, it's a massively growing market. And so when you are investing as a customer, you want to make sure that you're investing in a solution that ticks all the boxes. So we're delighted to have partaken in the report. We're delighted to be positioned in the report and on the radar exactly where we are. And of course, it helps us for growth as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the reason why. I mean, had it not been impartial, LinkShadow would probably be in the leader on growth part as well. This is the reason. I mean, we are very, I would say, very neutral that way. It's a very, very fair assessment on both the indices. I mean, had it not been fair, then you can produce a report which wherever and whomever you want to show it as a leader, you could have done that too.
Absolutely. And indeed, on our website at www.linkshadow.com, the report is there in its entirety, free to be downloaded. And, we have it on all of our social media platforms as well, our Twitter and our LinkedIn, etc., etc. We have spoken a lot about network detection and response. We've spoken briefly, you mentioned, 3 billion and the development and the growth. And we can see that, we can see year on year that our product is improving, that our services are improving, that we're developing it. We're also seeing our sales and everything increasing as well. And it's a lot to do with the innovation, but it's also the developing market. So where would you see NDR going within the next, say, 3 to 5 years, for example?
I think NDR as a technology, as a concept, has got a very promising future. I mean, I did share some numbers, $3 billion. Globally, almost 16-17% CAGR over the next 4 to 5 years or so. But I believe these numbers are probably slightly underestimated. In my personal opinion, I think it would be a lot more because the way the security landscape is shaping up, I mean, if you look at the security landscape now, the threat spectrum itself has widened massively in the last couple of years, right? And even if you look at, for example, let's talk about cloud, for example. Now, within cloud itself, you have got on-premise, you've got the pure cloud, you've got hybrid, and you've got so many different models itself, right? And then you're looking at things like artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, so on and so forth. The spectrum just keeps widening, broader and broader. The beauty of NDR is because, it is not dependent on the traditional signature-based, mechanism of prevention and detection. It is more about the behavior and spotting those anomalies as such, in the overall network spectrum as such. That is where, that is what the beauty of NDR is, in my opinion. And from that perspective, even if you look at, there are very few other products or substitute products as such in the market at this stage, okay, that can actually replace NDR or can actually deliver something of the sophistication as well as of the scale that NDR can actually deliver, right? So, I mean, the market would typically slow down if it is not good enough or there is a substitution for that.
Yeah.
None of these factors are there in case of NDR, right? So for NDR, it's just upwards. I believe in the next 4 to 5 years, I believe that, this market would typically be at least 20-25% year-on-year growth rate. That's what I believe. And not just worldwide, even in the region as well.
Yeah.
That's how I see the future of NDR.
Well, it's not just a case, I suppose, of developing, we look at percentages. But network detection and response as a whole has gone from maybe a number of years back as being a good to have solution.
Yeah.
You know, it helps your software, it helps your teams, you know, from network detection, it helps them, I suppose, monitor their networks. But you just mentioned a number of different solutions there, and the amount of products that I suppose CISOs need to analyze and look at on a day-to-day basis. Having an NDR at the core, where you have a one single pane of glass overview of your entire security and network posture, I mean, it stands to reason from a very, you know, even a non-technical person that if you have everything in one place without the need of jumping into solution A, B, and C, that it improves efficiency,
Absolutely.
cost efficiency for training, right down the line. So, yeah, as I said, it's no longer a good to have. It's now a requirement, which is obviously needing that growth.
Well, definitely, it is definitely a must-have, I would say. And I mean, the point that you mentioned about having one single pane of the complete information. So, you know, NDR essentially acts as a single version of truth. I would say you just look at the complete dashboard. It gives you the complete view of your overall posture itself. And more importantly, I would say it also supports the, it's not just about the detection piece. It's also about the prevention part as well. You know, if you go back a couple of years back, there were a lot of similar technologies, even UEB as a concept. You know, it was more about reporting. It was more about detection. It wasn't so much around prevention. And this is where, you know, NDR comes into play. So it has to do, detection will continue to be there, but at the same time, it is also about prevention as well. It supports in making the right decision at the right time by pinpointing where exactly is the problem, where exactly is the issue. You know, and imagine doing it across multiple infrastructure components, across different tools, technologies, and not just the network itself. So yeah,
Right.
I agree.
You're using your UEBA, you're relying on your AI models, on your machine learning models, not only, as you mentioned, to detect, but also to investigate and indeed respond as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something that our team are very, very proud of our solution. Of course, network detection response in general is clearly thriving in the market and seen as being a very, very important tool going forward. So I suppose on that note, and on that positive note, on a very, very positive outlook for the future, I will thank you for coming in today, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We're very, very proud to have you here in our Dubai office. The next time you're in Saudi, please go in and visit our Saudi team.
I would.
Indeed, wherever else you travel across the world, we have multiple offices. So look, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. And please give all of our best regards to the entire Frost & Sullivan team.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So thank you for joining us today on our episode of LinkShadow Talks. We're very, very proud to have Saurabh Verma from Frost & Sullivan in here with us today, discussing the recent Frost & Sullivan report of 2024. Please stay tuned to our social medias. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Twitter, we are on YouTube, where we'll be posting all of our future podcasts, and indeed, feel free to take a look back at some of our previous recordings as well. Until next time, thank you for watching. This is LinkShadow Talk.